My name is Kelly Ohlert. I am a Michigan-based author, and I have two books out so far, and maybe three, depending on when this goes live, because my next book comes out February 18th. And so my debut was To Get to the Other Side, and I also have Let's Get Quizzical. And the one coming out in February, I don't have a physical copy yet, so I have a pillow has the cover on it. My mother-in-law gets me pillows every year for Christmas with my book covers on them. So I've got a pillow with the book cover.
That's amazing. I'm actually looking forward to an exciting proposition. It's really good.
Thank you.
What inspired an exciting proposition?
So my mom and I had talked about writing a book together for a long time, and I had had those two books come out. And so while I was kind of in the process of going through edits and stuff on those, we had been on a vacation together, and we were just like, you know what, now feels like the time. Let's do it. Let's write a book together. So we were on vacation. We were sitting at the beach trying to plot out this book, and just came up with the concept of two women who form a pact to date each other's exes, and the story kind of grew from there. There wasn't really anything going on around us or anything like that that inspired the specific storyline.
It still seems like an interesting premise as well. Like, because normally friends do not date each other's exes. It's like so it's really good.
Right. Well, I will say they don't necessarily start off the book as friends. So Moxie, it's intended to be a two-book series, and each book will follow one of the two couples. And so Moxie, who is the heroine of the first book, she kind of has never been comfortable kind of giving her full trust to people and just relying on other people, whether that's in friendships or in relationships. She just kind of is a one and done kind of person. And so that's part of a big portion of the storyline is not only her developing relationship with the hero, Wyatt, but also the friendship developing with Hannah over the course of this. So when they form the pact, they're really kind of more acquaintances who work together.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
What drew you to writing in the first place?
Reading. I've always been a huge reader. Was definitely one of the kids who had the flashlight in bed,
Yeah.
sneaky reading all night. And I've always loved reading. And then, got away from it a little bit when I was in college because a lot of people do that. I was
Mhm.
more invested in partying for a while here, and then came back to reading and just really fell in love with it some more. And I had started writing actually like a middle grade fantasy, was my first attempt at writing. And I tried that just because my husband is a gamer and I wanted something to do while he was gaming. So I gave writing a shot, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't coming out. So I put it aside for a little while. And then my mom introduced me to Sophie Kinsella books, and I just absolutely loved them. And I was like, oh, these romantic comedies, I feel like this is what my voice could be. This is
Mm.
why it wasn't working before. I was writing the wrong thing. And so then I started writing, and I was like, I think this works. I think this is actually something. And so I had her read it, and I trusted her to be honest but also supportive. So a good mix of that. And she said, yeah, you should run with this. And so then I got involved in like the writing community and started learning more about writing craft and finding myself critique partners and went from there.
I was always wondering if you feel like you start writing fantasy, because I'm a huge fantasy reader, but I think writing fantasy is much more in depth.
Right.
And
Yeah, you got to build the worlds and a magic system, and there's a lot more to it. Whereas romance, I mean, don't get me wrong, definitely is a skill set, and you have to really nail the emotion with romance. And so it is a very different skill set, but it was nice not to have to do that level of world building.
uh, world building, I think, it's a much more a bit more simpler, because you can do it based it on the real world. You can create your own towns and everything, but you can sort of go off what you know more than having to completely create everything like you do in a fantasy.
Exactly, yeah.
How did you choose which character to center the story around?
Um, so we plan to do both. I mean, so we had Moxie and Hannah as our kind of um characters that we just started talking about, and these are the two characters that we've got. And for whatever reason, Moxie is the one that spoke to us first, although I feel like Hannah has a really strong presence in the book, and I feel like readers are really going to love her. I think she's a great character. So the hope is that she was definitely strongly in the book, and the hope is that people want to see even more of her in the next one.
Did you find Maxie or Wyatt's point of view easier to write?
So the way that we handled co-writing
Mhm.
is that because we live in different states. So my mom lives in the Chicago area and I live in Michigan. So the way we divided it up is I wrote Moxie's point of view originally, and then she wrote Wyatt's point of view. And then on edits, we both edited both points of view to kind of smooth out the voice a little bit and make it sound a little bit more cohesive and like one person wrote it. I didn't have to draft for Wyatt, so that was nice. But we flipped for the second book. So in drafting, I'm currently writing Simon's point of view, and she is writing Hannah's point of view for the second book. So it's been fun.
Do you find writing a male perspective harder than it would be a female perspective, or is it just the character speaks to you just as much as no matter what?
So I really struggled with that for to get to the other side. I had written one other book before that one, and that was kind of like my practice book that got me my agent, but didn't end up getting published. And maybe it'll see the light of day someday, but that day is not today. Um, but that was single point of view. So to get to the other side was the first book that I attempted to do that dual point of view. And I was very nervous about writing the male perspective. So I had my brother read it.
That's a smart idea. Get the
Which
male
is good.
perspective.
But the poor guy, there's some physical reactions in the book to the heroine. And so he left comments that said like that said, I know you came to me asking for help, and this is an area in which I can help you, but I'm going to write these comments, and we are never going to acknowledge that we had this conversation. So he had to give me some feedback on that.
That's fantastic. It's always
Poor
good
guy.
to have a male perspective. Give feedback though.
Yeah, I mean, I might have traumatized my poor brother in the process, but
Forget
it
about
made it
it, or
look
he
better,
was
I
wrong.
hope.
What's the process for writing your book since it is co-written? Is it different? What is it similar to how your process was for your other two books?
So I'm generally more of a pantser. I have like a very, very vague idea of where the books are going before I start writing. I have tried outlining it further for a book that I proposed and then ultimately didn't end up going with. And writing out a full outline before drafting. And I swear I could have drafted the entire book faster than I wrote that outline because my brain just does not work that way. But I've kind of had to force it to work that way a little bit more with co-writing because in order for us to kind of meet the timelines that we've laid out, we have to be working on chapters at the same time. So we have to be at least one chapter ahead, or if she's, got more time than I do at a given point of time, or I do, then we have to be plotted out several chapters ahead. So it has involved a little bit more outlining for me. And just having someone else there to help make decisions has made me far less decisive. So I'm kind of like, I don't know, what do you think? And she has to kind of push me to help make decisions because I lean a little bit more on her because I can.
I guess could be sort of a little bit restricted if you sort of like the freedom and creativity of just following the character along as well, instead of having a sort of a plot, an outline to say that no, this is what is actually happening. It's like, but I don't want the characters doesn't want to go there.
Right. I mean, we end up calling each other very frequently to be like, hey, I just need 2 minutes. I am writing this chapter. Did we decide this? And so there are a lot of those conversations that happen.
At least it's a really good like collaborative
Yeah.
process as well. What's your approach to character building? Because since it's a romance, that you're not necessarily having to do much world building.
Yeah. So in character building, I follow the process used in Story Genius by Lisa Cron to kind of help develop my characters a little bit more and figure out what their like emotional wound is that is driving the decisions that they make, and do that. And I like to write like an interview with my characters, kind of like we're doing, and just ask them about their lives. And I just type out responses to myself to get a feel for their voice a bit before I start writing.
I always find it so interesting how everyone builds their characters as well. I think it's a different and unique process to for everyone to see how their character's voice come through as well.
Yeah, and I also feel like a big piece of it is kind of trying to find that, where they're opposites, because a lot of times there are certain pieces of chemistry that are going to make them get along and work really well together, but there's usually either with their wounds or something, there's going to be something that makes them opposites of each other. Lissa K. Adams is a writer friend of mine. She wrote the Bromance Book Club series, and she gave some really good advice to me when I was starting. That was she calls it the meatloaf theory. That your characters would do anything for love, but they won't do that, and so you have to figure out what the one thing that they won't do for love is and force them to do it. So
That's really
it was a really great piece of advice that sticks in my mind really well, that I follow.
that is a perfect piece of advice. Did you have a favorite moment to write in an exciting proposition or anything that happened might have happened?
Yeah. So this book really fought us a lot. And so it has gone through massive, massive rewrites. So there are a lot of scenes that got changed quite a bit, are no longer in there. So there was one scene that we really wanted to do that was kind of like, are you familiar with the movie Mrs. Doubtfire?
Yes.
So the scene at the restaurant where he's like doing, he's like changing personalities essentially and having to run back and forth between them. We originally had something where Hannah was being forced to do a little something like that between Wyatt and Moxie, because we had a little bit more of um we kept things from Wyatt a little bit more in the first draft, and we decided to be a little more honest with him at the beginning. So
Mm.
that's changed a lot, but that was really fun to write and to try to kind of recreate that same sort of feeling. But my favorite scene to write that is in there now is, how do I say this without being spoilery? So in the third act, when Moxie is in need of some cheering up, the scene where Hannah is kind of consoling her and going along with Moxie's coping mechanisms, I think just shows a lot about their friendship. And I love that scene so much.
I love those type of scenes that are the sort of like heartfelt and like people cheering each other up as well. It's like, yep, we do need that in our lives too. So it's glad that you're experiencing it through the characters too.
Yeah.
Which of the characters do you relate to the most and why?
Um, I don't know. I feel like there's always a little piece of me that gets put into every one of my characters. Like I've got a little bit more of Moxie's sarcasm sometimes, but I'm also more bubbly like Hannah is. And Wyatt's more adventurous, and I have a little bit of that in me as well. So I feel like there's always a little piece, even like little characteristics and little mannerisms I'll sometimes give to my characters. Like Trixie in my first book, To Get to the Other Side, she stands like a flamingo and props her foot like on her calf. And I do that. Like, I don't know why, but I always stand like that. So that's just a random quirk that I gave her as well. So little things like that sneak their way in.
Oh, I love hearing that because I'm like, yeah, you can't write a book and the characters without something going into them that's from you as well, no matter how much you sort of try not to.
Yeah, and real life moments too,
Mm.
or inspiration from real life moments. Like in that same book, she almost gets injured while taking him to um urgent care to get treated for his injury. And that was kind of inspired by the nurses having to treat my husband at the hospital when I had our first child, because he sliced his finger open, cutting the bottom of some stems off of some flowers that he was getting for me. So like just that concept of the wrong person having to be treated was just kind of a funny thing to bring in.
Okay. How has writing and publishing books changed the way you see yourself, if it has?
Oh gosh. I think the biggest thing about it is because we think so much about that emotional wound and all of the characters' backstories and how their life story is affecting the decisions they make today. It is a nightmare having that knowledge and having my brain function that way as a parent, because all day, every day, I'm just thinking like, oh my God, did I just give my kid their emotional wound? Have I just traumatized them on like every
Oh,
little thing
no.
that I do? So yeah, that part's not super fun.
I never thought of it like that as well, with that side of writing at all, with the backstories and everything that you write as well. I never thought of it like that.
It is, as a parent, it is rough.
It really would be.
Yes, for sure.
Are there any authors or books that inspired you to become a writer in your writing?
I mean, I would say Sophie Kinsella is who kind of brought me to the romance genre, and like the voice of like her characters, and like Stephanie Plum from Janet Ivanovich's Stephanie Plum series. I feel like the voice of that character and her sense of humor kind of inspired my sense of humor. So those are kind of the ones that brought me to the genre and my style of voice, I would say. And Lissa K. Adams, I mentioned, I learned a lot from her and my friend Mika Usher, who's also an amazing author. They both taught me a lot when I was brand new to the process. So shout out to them. Um, and then some of the other romance authors that were like the first ones that I discovered when I started reading the genre are like Sally Thorne and Christina Lauren.
I think to be a fantastic writer, you need to still sort of have to read in your genre to see what other people are doing. But I guess you wouldn't. Do you read when you're writing within your genre, or do you stick to a different genre when you're in the writing stage?
Yep. So I mostly do audiobooks because any spare time that I have is spent writing, editing, promoting. So I don't have a lot of time to physically read anymore unless I'm doing a blurb for another author. Yeah, I do constantly read, and I read probably 90% romance. I would actually kind of like to read a little bit more varied. I love reading romance, but I would like to read more, probably like 60% romance. But I have this intense fear of running into other romance authors and being like, I haven't read your book. I'm sorry. So I go to conferences and I sign at conferences, but I look at the list of attending authors and I do my best to, even when there's like 200 authors going to these, I try to get through as many of their books as I possibly can to try to read at least one from as many authors as I can. So I usually manage to get over 100 of the attending authors because a lot of them I've already read, and then with targeted reading, try to read more. But it's just that means that I don't get to as many books in other genres as I would like to.
I think that's one of the fun things with going to like conventions and conferences as well, is like trying to see if you've read as many authors as you can so you can actually go see them and have a chat with them.
Right.
That's the best sort of thing about them.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book?
Couple things I would say is, you can't edit a blank page, so just get the book down. And you don't have to have a huge chunk of time to write. I started writing way faster when I realized that I can get a couple paragraphs down in 15 minutes. And those 15-minute increments add up really fast. So, just use whatever time you've got and squeeze it in. And then the absolute biggest thing has got to be to just find your people. I would not at all be published, let alone have, two books out and another one coming out soon if I didn't have the community that I have. So my in-person writing friends who've been amazing, and when I've felt defeated, have taken me on writing retreats and given me pep talks, and so many of writing groups that I've found online and collaborated with those people who've become amazing friends and critique partners and cheerleaders. So it's nice to get advice from people who are experienced and have been through it. And it's good to have those contacts for sure, because they know things that you don't know. But it's even more important to find people who are at the same stage as you, who can go through it with you, you can commiserate with on all of the ups and downs, and just really be each other's support systems. It's invaluable.
You definitely need the people there to hype you up if you're in a like a tricky spot in your writing, or even if you're like, I can't be bothered writing today. Like, no, you keep going, you can do it.
Yes.
What's your favorite writing snack or drink? If you have
Hmm.
one, you might not. That's all right.
I mean, I'm mostly fueled by water when I am writing. I will confess that if I am really, really stuck and feel like I'm just too in my head about something, I might have margarita or two and just get rid
That
of
sounds
the
like a good way to.
inhibition. So, I mean, it works. It gets the inhibitions down and gets me out of my head so much, and just gets the words on the page, which is all you need sometimes. So there's that. And sometimes I like to reward myself with some ice cream when I've gotten to my word count goals for the day.
That sounds like a good reward.
Yes, I gotta have the ice cream.
Nothing wrong with it.
Nope.
Do you play music while you're writing? If you do, what's your favorite type of music?
I do not. I know some people can do that, and I don't know how, because it baffles me. I always sing along when I listen to music, so I could not do anything with words, because I would be just singing along and not at all paying attention to what I'm writing. And even if I was to try to do instrument, I mean, I do use like Brain FM sometimes, which is just like a couple beats. It's not really music per se. So I'll do that sometimes. But that's about the extent of what I can listen to.
I think I'd be similar to you, that I would just start having a karaoke session instead of
Yeah,
writing.
exactly. It's just there's no way I can't do it.
And my final question is, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
I mean, it's got to be my mom. She's my first reader. She's always been so supportive of me. I have a bracelet that she bought me before I got my agent, before I got my book deal, anything. It's a bracelet that says she believes she could, so she did, and it has like a typewriter on it. And then 3 months later, I got my agent.
Wow.
So that was really cool. And she's turned herself into a walking billboard. Her purse has my book covers on it and says, "You've got to read this." And she took treats and letters from me to my grade school and middle school and high school to tell the teachers there about it. She's just an amazing supporter.
Sounds like you definitely have a promotional guide as well,
Yes,
so
for
you don't need
sure.
the help.